And so our daily ad spend of like $75 at the start, where I was like quite nervous. By the end of it, we're spending like $900 a day. So you're fine with it, right? Like, no, not sweating at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Masters of Crowdfunding podcast. Today we have Nikhil and Anish. They are the creators of the Loka Chai maker, which just ended at just over $600,000 in funds raised on Kickstarter. Welcome to the podcast, guys. It's really a pleasure for you guys to join us just a few days after your campaign's end. I know it can be very hectic during this time, so really appreciate you guys making the time, joining us and sharing your learnings with the rest of the community and creators and backers. So tell us what the Loka Chai maker is.
Firstly, it's kind of fun to be called a master of crowdfunding. That's the first. And secondly, you're catching us at the end of the hectic time. So, we finished on Sunday, and this week it's been nice to just relax actually and not have to check the numbers every half an hour. But it's been amazing. The last month has been so cool. Anish, why don't you answer the actual question?
Sure. So what is the Loka Chai maker? Great question, Kevin. So the Loka Chai maker is what we call it is an innovative new product which has never been created before. That revolutionizes the way that you make chai. Our sort of trifecta of what we were aiming for with it when we created it was to find a way to make chai in a way that's quicker, cleaner, and easier than ever's been done before. So if you ever made chai before at home, it is a real hassle to make. It boils over. It's a faff because there are so many different ingredients you have to grind from scratch and sort of make and sort of brew. And the cleanup, if you've ever done it as well before, it is a real hassle. You're having to clean constantly, scrubbing at pots and pans. And it just makes life so difficult. There's so many people we know, including myself and Nikhil, used to not make chai because it was such a hassle, and it used to be only a weekend thing or sort of on a rare occasion. So the Loka Chai maker lets you make your chai in a way which is easily accessible. We like to call it your daily cup, and it lets you make it in a way that's quicker, cleaner, and easier.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that. So Anish talked about, we have two target audiences. We have people that Anish described, which is those that have already got experience making chai at home and they're just fed up and it's really difficult. We also have a lot of people buying our products who haven't actually made chai at home, but they are used to drinking chai either in cafes or instant chai tea bags. And we're bringing them a way to make chai for the first time, which is equally important because they've already thought about how they can do it. One of the things we like to talk about is that in the coffee world, it's now sacrilegious to drink an instant coffee. But people still drink instant chai made from tea bags and powders. And again, part of our mission is we don't want that. We want people to enjoy the taste and the health benefits of a real, authentic chai at home more frequently.
I love it. You guys mentioned in a video that I was watching that featured the Loka Chai maker, and it showed a table laid out with, dozens and dozens and dozens of your prototypes. And one of you guys, I forgot which one of you said, if we knew what we know now, we would have never started the project. So talk to me a little bit more about what you meant by that.
Look, I think that's a truism of any entrepreneur, right? Like I started my career in music tech and I launched a streaming service. And I said the same thing back then, that if I knew what I knew about music rights and music IP and getting licensing deals with record labels and publishers, we wouldn't have started Mixcloud. So I don't think that's unique to us. But that naivety gives you the optimism and the hope that it gets you started and carries you through the tough times.
Yeah, I would say I'm probably coming into a little bit more fresh, to be honest, Kevin, in the sense that this is my first company that I've worked on as a founder, and I probably was a bit more naive. So I sort of in my head, I think Nikhil was the one who mentioned that on the video that we did actually. But in my head, I was like, well, this is just part of the journey. And actually, this is what you just have to get through. So it's one foot in front of the other, But looking back, I think when we saw the amount of work that went into it, and actually we sort of reflected ourselves, the amount of ups and downs that we had along the way, that definitely was true. So thank God that we persevered along the way.
And Anish is the hero, honestly, man. Anish is the hero in this story. Like, he just smashed it. You're talking about the prototypes 100 or so prototypes. And that was a really, really long, extensive and difficult part of the journey to actually, we essentially went through the kind of double diamond design thinking journey. But really, I think the bigger challenge was finding a manufacturer. Once we had a brilliant prototype and a product that we knew really worked, finding someone that was willing to produce this in mass production, willing to actually go through the arduous work of making bespoke tooling and making a product that is really unique was really tough. And Anish, like, honestly, man, he smashed it on just the perseverance, going to the trade fairs, meeting, dozens of manufacturers. And then ultimately, we can tell you a bit more about how it manifested. But it all kind of came together, the stars aligned, and we've got an incredible manufacturing partner now.
Yeah, let's talk about that. How did you find that manufacturer?
Oh, great question. As Nick said, I mean, thank you, Nick, for those lovely words. Very kind of you. It was just a lot of persistence. That is exactly what it was. I think we created a short list with our engineer Andy, who's, by the way, big shout out to Andy, super talented engineer. Without him, we definitely would not be here as well. But Andy, myself, and Nick pulled together a short list of about 15 or 16 suppliers that we thought were going to be incredible, that could potentially good fits, good quality, high output. I went to a trade fair in Frankfurt on a Saturday cold morning at 5 a.m. when I got up and left London, and flew out there, took a prototype, very, very early prototype, and then was trying to sort of charm everyone into saying, oh, this is an incredible product. You have to work with us, but it's going to be incredible. It's going to revolutionize chai. It's going to change the way people make tea. It's going to change a lot around the tea industry as well. Sort of really, really sort of pitching ourselves in how we sort of believe the product was going to disrupt the market. And everyone there was sort of very, very sort of enthusiastic. And then one by one, they all started dropping out as I started having calls with, a supplier in Italy, and then a supplier in China, and a supplier in India. It all started sort of fading away. And the only thing I can put it down to was the fact that it was a new product, and it was so difficult to actually sort of commit to this, because, from their perspective, it's very easy to find a supplier, to find a customer who's going to make a new pan and sort of churn out 100,000 units of the new pan with the ceramic coating. And that's great sales, but it takes a real sort of a supplier with real vision and sort of gumption to say, look, actually, I really believe in this too. I'm really excited by it. I'm going to put my sort of effort and energy behind it too. And sort of when in that journey, as we got rejected, we actually got connected to another supplier who ended up saying no to us as well, but really, really enjoyed and loved the product. And they said, look, we've got a joint venture with a partner in China. We can connect you to them. We think these guys will be a good fit for you. And the stars aligned, and everything worked out the right way it did. And here we are today. So in a nutshell, the word is persistence. Yeah.
Well, I've got to add to that, Anish, though. The stars aligned also in the sense that you met that partner in China, and then we also then started working with a local agent who was introduced to us via our design agency in London, Pentagram. That local agent already had a relationship with this factory. So it was kind of this pincer movement that they'd met Anish. They saw that this guy had credibility and was serious, but then they also had a direct relationship with our agent. And I think that, that is really important advice for other creators, is that you've got to have people on the ground. It's really important to have people on the ground.
Just on that, yeah, I think technically they didn't have the relationship. Actually, they didn't. So we actually introduced it. But the point that Nick's mentioning is true, right? Which is we had an agent on the ground who could vet this supplier in question. So when we came up with them, that voice was the person that went and checked the factory out, checked actually, are they legitimate? Can they do the due diligence? Can they create the product that we want at the quality and the standard that we want? And without that, we definitely wouldn't be here today. So that is 100% true. That without that agent, we wouldn't have found and been able to get the sort of DD answer that we needed. So 100%.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting that you guys mentioned that, because, everyone thinks that they have the product and they are interviewing suppliers. But what you guys mentioned there, I want to highlight, is suppliers are at the same time interviewing you, especially the good suppliers and great manufacturers. They have an abundance of products that they could potentially work with, right? What is going to get them to be interested to focus on your product, work with you to prototype and manufacture, and spend the time and resources with you? And it's definitely a two-way street, and you definitely have to sell them on your product and your vision as well. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on like how that was what you think, like what advice would you give to other product creators to capture the attention of great suppliers and manufacturers?
Good question. I would say there's a few things. One is know the market that you're going into and be able to demonstrate, in a nutshell, is know the market you're going into and be able to demonstrate the rationale, ideally with a working prototype or some form of prototype that you can point to, as opposed to just, this is an idea, and give them a reason to believe in your product in the same way that you do. And that the follow on from that is you have to have the conviction and belief that this thing is going to be amazing. And this thing that you're going to do is going to do whatever you believe it will. Those three things combined are a very, very powerful force when you're then speaking to someone who's coming to your product cold, coming to your idea cold, and doesn't really know whether or not they should believe in it. Without that, it's very, very hard to then kind of drive the conversation forward.
I'll add to that. So that's kind of like the conviction piece of it and the confidence piece, and I'll add to that professionalism. So, your point was you've got to sell. Absolutely. So when we contacted these potential partners, we sent them a really professional deck. It wasn't just an email. Like, we've got an idea. Hey, let's jump on a call. We sent them really polished slides, a really strong vision for the company beyond the first product, so we can really sell them on the long term. We want to be a long-term partner for you. And then also really professional, like kind of like a product brief, like the CAD designs, the engineering drawings, a really detailed brief that says like, this is actually what we're looking for from our partner. It just shows that we're professional, we've done the homework.
Yeah, I want to add to that, like showing that you've done the homework, because some people go to a manufacturer without the manufacturing experience, and the manufacturer is going to look at the product and the entrepreneur and go, oh my gosh, like I'm going to have to do all the work for this guy, right? They have no idea what they're doing, what they're talking about. But the fact that you have some sort of prototype and that, summarized brief that you talked about, Nikhil, that already shows that you're willing to take the initial steps and put in the effort, and that they don't need to figure everything else out for you, and that they could trust you to figure out the sales and the future manufacturing as well, because they're ultimately looking to invest the time in now and get business for 4, 5, 10 years, right? And that's where manufacturers make their money.
And Kevin, to put it into context, I think these numbers might be interesting for the listeners, that our factory, and obviously we're not going to divulge names, so we're not giving away any confidential information here. Our factory does around about $25 million in revenue. And let's say we as a client represent $250,000. So we're like 1% of their business, let's say, high level. So that, 1%, not enormous, it's not going to move the needle for them, but equally, it's not nothing, right? And as a 1% client, over the next 5 to 10 years, we could become a 5% client. We could become a 10% client. So I think it's really important to know that when you first start with them, you are really effectively a rounding error. So you've got to sell them on the vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're taking up probably 20-25% of their engineering capabilities as well, because a new product requires new tooling, new setup, new manufacturing line, etc. So you really have to convince the suppliers to commit 20-25% of their resources to get 1% of the revenue. I mean, that is a hard sell, and you really should be doing your homework. Like Nikhil mentioned, and Anish, you highlighted as well. The other thing I also want to highlight for listeners too, speaking with manufacturers, is showing traction helps a lot, right? You don't necessarily need $600,000 raised in a crowdfunding campaign, right? But showing them that you have thousands of email signups for the product, right? Or dollar deposits for the product, etc. And even if it's just a dozen or 2 dozen, but if you show them on a week-by-week basis, you actually have a system, you have a plan to execute and get them sales volume. That's what's going to motivate them to take action and allocate those 20-25% of engineering resources to your 1% products, right?
Yeah, spot on.
Tell them about the call. Tell them about the call you did when you actually announced our Kickstarter numbers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Of course. Just before we go into that, Kevin, the one thing I just wanted to finish off on the point you mentioned is it's also super competitive, right? Because you're trying to speak to the supplier, trying to convince them of your product and idea. Don't forget, you're not the only person trying to do that. There are loads of other people just like you with an idea and a belief and a sort of a vision that also wants their time and resource and wants them to commit that same resource that they've got to them. So it's super important that you over-index exactly on everything that, Nikhil mentioned in terms of the professionalism, the view, the deck, the vision, the product, the idea. All of those things are super, super important. And just to follow up on what Nick said. So when at the end of the Kickstarter, when we were coming towards the close, we had a call with the sort of our agent in China, and then also our manufacturer as well. And we announced the numbers that we had. We've received close to 600,000 in backing and 5,600 over 5,600 backers. And I kid you not, the response on the call was, yeah, like they were just so overjoyed and so happy to hear the response. I was taken aback. I was like, wow, they were so happy. Which really goes to show you the power of the fact that once they're invested in it and believe in your product too, they are a partner and want you to succeed as well.
That reaction is when you know you have a good long-term partner. They're rooting for you. They're your cheerleaders. They're your partners in the business, right? And I would Nikhil, I know you're an investor. You're an angel investor in 40 plus startups, right? And it's same way that a manufacturer is vetting your products and your business. Investors are vetting. If you guys are looking, I don't know if you guys are looking to raise money, but a lot of our other clients launching physical products that are complicated with electronics and expensive tooling and software and development costs, they're looking for investors a lot of times, in addition to the funds that they raise on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, whatever platform they end up using. And it's the same thing. You have to show professionalism, right? Like you mentioned, Nikhil, and you have to show traction, because there's a million other people talking to those same investors, pitching you, Nikhil, right? Every single day. I have this idea of this product. And you're the one thing that you're probably looking for is this entrepreneur actually going to be able to execute, right? And showing the traction shows the ability to execute. I just want you to elaborate a little bit more, or give your thoughts on, Nikhil, how you vet investments and how you vetted this investment, because it's the ultimate investment of your own time in addition to capital.
Yeah, it's a funny one. You're right. You're absolutely right with this one. And I put a lot more into this than I'd put capital-wise into angel investments. Yeah, look, with angel investments, I often say to people, I'm not a very good angel investor because I tend to invest more with my heart than with my head. And I'm like the kind of person that I like to back founders that are building things that I think really need to exist in the world. And people that are operating through love and conviction. So my portfolio is not like fintech, enterprise, B2B SaaS, and the next like AI company that's building contracts, law, automation. Sorry, Anish, as a lawyer. My portfolio is like a company that's revolutionizing dance education for women and music studio business, so the live music booking platform, and beautiful, brilliant D2C brands that I think just need to exist in the world. But the thing that I do tend to vet is the founders' passion, belief, and conviction, but then also their momentum. So you use the word traction. Traction's interesting because not all companies can demonstrate traction before they have launched. What they can demonstrate is that they're getting, pardon my French, but getting shit done. So what I'm looking for is like you speak to someone and you hear from them like 2 weeks later, or they send an investor update, or you send you an update on how things are going. And you're like, oh, wow, you're making progress. Like in the last 2 weeks, these are things that you've done since we last spoke. And when you can see that people are just moving fast and iterating and learning, you know that founder is going to figure things out. Because the business often looks very different 2 years later than what their vision was when they first pitched you.
That's so good. Anything you want to add to that, Anish?
No, the only thing I'd follow up and say is those things that Nick spoke about, when I was just hearing him speaking there, I think we can both proudly look back and say we managed to achieve that, right? Like before we went live, we'd achieved 20,000 signups on email. We'd had thousands of people put their the dollar deposit down. We'd made so much progress with prototypes, iterations, getting a looks like prototype that looks beautiful and worked incredibly and solved the problem that we wanted. And that was all just before we went live. So I think when I was hearing Nikhil's list, I was going tick 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 in my head. So it was a nice validation. Great to hear.
I mean, I think I can take the baton from there and just segue into like the actual crowdfunding itself, and I think why we were able to be successful. There's a lot of the things that Anish said in terms of the diligence, the time, the effort we put into the page, the positioning, the creative. But actually, from a product perspective, we were really far in the journey. And we put a lot of effort into communicating that very clearly in the page, that like, we are not just an idea. We're not just a prototype. We have a manufacturer lined up. We've done our design for manufacture stage. We are about to press go on tooling. And so that all those things that we could de-risk, we put a lot of effort into making that very, very clear to the consumer, that we are beyond, way beyond just basic prototype.
Yeah. Maybe, Nikhil, we were talking about like the different stages of the crowdfunding campaign and what worked and what didn't work for you guys. Let's just dive right into that.
Yeah. I mean, look, the first thing to say, shout out Launchboom. The whole pre-launch thing, it's just so important. And honestly, if we didn't have Launchboom's playbook and guidance, I think we would have been so lost. We knew obviously that you got to do a pre-launch, right? And we would have done that somehow. But just having the Launchboom platform, the technology, and the people and the playbook just made it so, I wouldn't not say easy, but we didn't have to think too much, right? What's the next thing we've got to do? We just followed the playbook. And that was so important. But yeah, if we kind of take it in order, and Anish obviously step in, I think the first thing really was like the learnings from the pre-launch. Aside from building an audience and building a community, the learnings was so important. And what we realized was very quickly was that through all of the ad testing, creative testing, and A/B testing on the page, we managed to quite quickly really simplify our product down to like two very simple hooks: the problem hook and the solution hook. The problem, a pan boiling over onto your stove and someone going, tearing their hair out, right? Like, that's the problem. You show people the boiling over pan and they go, I get it. The hook, the infinity chai fountain. You show people that, they go, whoa, what is that? And it was literally as simple as that. We boiled it down to these two, left hook, uppercut. This is the problem. This is the solution. And then we just iterated on that creative and put out different versions on ads. The landing page, really, we built it around that. And I think that's what converted for us.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd say the other part is that complementing all of that was then this beautiful design that we had and journey throughout. We had so many comments and feedback through on the school, from the Launchboom school, and also just from other people who were commenting saying, wow, this is incredible design. I've not come across this before. When we usually see Kickstarters or sort of landing pages, it looks like this or this. And we really put a lot of effort and time into honing that. So it had a feel that sort of really represented what we wanted our customers to think about when they saw our product or when they saw the problem, and it really resonated with them. So the combination of those things just worked really, really well at converting. Really, really well.
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest, Kevin. When we were assessing whether we want to work with Launchboom or not, the single biggest hesitation was the landing page builder. We asked your BD guy to send over a few examples of like the ones that you're most proud of. And he sent us some examples and we were like, they don't look very good to us. And we had this really big debate, right, about what represents a good looking landing page and what represents a well converting landing page. And we were really hesitant about, will we be able to take this landing page as far as we want in terms of the look and feel that we want to represent? So we don't want it to just be a plain white background with a Helvetica font. And in the end, we obviously committed, and we are so happy we did. But we just put a lot of work into hacking the hell out of the landing page builder, which you can do, right? Like, that's the thing with the Launchboom page builder. You can do a lot more than the Kickstarter one. Lots of custom CSS, our custom fonts, our brand colors. And I think that's really important that you stand out. And I think actually we kind of, to some extent, went against the advice, which was make it neutral. And we were like, no, we don't want to make it neutral because that's not who we are. We want to create a brand here and an experience that really represents what we stand for, which is creating a product that's rooted in tradition and reimagined for today. And the Loka brand is all about representing the kind of chaos and color of South Asia, but alongside the kind of contemporary, minimal, beautiful looking design.
Wow, there's so much there, but I want to double click on what you said in the very beginning, Nikhil. Like, all the testing got you down to, and all the learnings got you down to this image of someone seeing their chai overboil. And then, that hook of the fountain, right? The fountain effect. And for people who haven't seen the product, go just search Loka Chai Maker on Kickstarter, right? I'll link it in the notes as well. It's a really cool, visually appealing effect of the chai boiling over, but into the tea brewer, right? And into the strainer. And that video, or I would say not that particular video, but another variation of that video, I saw it on TikTok that went viral, right? And you really struck a chord with those two images. What was the process to get down to those? Because it seems so, in hindsight, it's always so straightforward, right? But in the beginning, especially when you're building the product and you're like, oh, it does this, we did that, we made the metal this thickness and the temperature conducts in this way and the strainer is this size. Like there's a million ways that you could talk about the product and the features. How do you get down to that essence that is now converting so darn well for you guys?
Frankly, very simply, it's the creative ad testing. So we really diligently followed the Launch Spoon playbook, which is, we put up a bunch of ads on Meta, testing with different audiences, but crucially testing first to find a winning creative. And then from there, your winning headline and your winning body copy or whatever you want to call it, primary text. And it was just through that journey, right? Like I can really, really remember now, and Anish talked about, and I talked about this very recently, we reflected that our brilliant launch room consultant, Hera, shout out Hera.
Big, I was about to say, big shout out to Hera. Big shout out.
Really enjoyed working with Hera. She's just a ninja, like she just gets it. And she has her instinct is very, very sharp. And so Hera straight away was like, this is the one, the fountain. That's the one that's going to work. And we were like, really? We both were just like, why are you so obsessed with this fountain? Like we were way more focused on showing the whole product. We felt like you've got to show people the whole product. Maybe someone holding it, pouring it, but like really the curves, obviously as the creators, we are way more proud of like showing people the whole thing, right? And in a really professional studio type shop. And she immediately was like, screw the professional studio shot. I don't care about that. It's about the fountain. So anyway, we tested all of them. Obviously, she was right. Like the professional studio shots didn't convert that well. Stills didn't really convert that well. But when you just showed like very simple video content that had like problem solution, we made a few different reels for Meta. And those are the ones that worked. We then carried that test into our landing page. We did a lot of A/B tests on the landing page. Some of them were just changing the order of things, right? So we were like, what happens if we start with the problem, then put the solution? What happens if we do it the other way around, right? And we just learned that like there's a certain order that this really works. And then we carried all of that through into our Kickstarter page.
And I've got to be honest, I was really shocked. Like when Nikhil was saying, Nikhil was in London recently and we were kind of reflecting on it and we were talking about that point. And I remember at the time when we had that conversation, I was quite skeptical because I thought I just took the UGC. I created the content with my phone in my kitchen when I was using the chai maker. We had one prototype. We still have one prototype that we use, which is our baby, our works like prototype that is our whole baby. And I remember using that and taking a video on my phone. And I just thought, I remember hearing Hera's comment like, that's the one you need to use. And I thought, what? Why would you use that over this beautiful shot of the whole product and these studio shots that we have? It doesn't make any sense. But she was absolutely right. Absolutely right. So listen to Hera, everyone.
I'm definitely going to share this with Hera. She is a gem of a person and a gem of a team member here at Launchboom. Actually, quick story on Hera. She worked for another agency prior to joining Launchboom, and she was copying a lot of the stuff that we were doing, like the stuff that we would publish on our blogs and stuff. She was actually taking that and implementing it for our competitor. And so as soon as we had an opening, she applied because why, rip it off when she could just build upon it and improve it. And we hired her right away. So yeah, we're so lucky to have Hera, and she's going to appreciate you guys saying that for sure.
I just want to double click. I just want to double click on the Hera point. We could talk about it for hours, but yeah, I used this word earlier, instinct. And in one of my previous roles when I was working for a product company, we talked a lot about this idea of like instinct versus insight. what does it mean to have like real research insight versus just really good instinct? And I think it's so important as an entrepreneur, as a founder, to develop instinct. And instinct is a muscle that you work on, right? And that's what I saw in her, is that she's done obviously dozens, probably hundreds of campaigns with different creators in different categories. Therefore, she's able to put on all of that learning and have very sharp, very quick instincts that still need to be tested and validated, right? They're not the answers, but they're conjectures.
Yeah, that's right. And we always tell people that too, like, hey, we can tell you what we think is going to work well, but always let the market tell you that, right? With their dollar deposits or email signups or, whatever we see as the positive indicator is for that specific experiment. So I really appreciate you guys sharing that and how you got down to that essence. And it's so funny because, like, again, in hindsight, you can look at it and you go, of course, those are the things that work. But I love that you guys shared, you were both shocked, and you thought the other things, other product positioning, other images would work better, right? What other learnings did you have in the pre-launch process that you think carried over to the live campaign and that will carry over into the post-campaign that worked really, really well?
I think, Anish, if you haven't got anything, I think the thing that you mentioned earlier, which is really like the way that we struck a balance between product versus brand comms. Again, we were told like, yeah, don't talk about your brand. But no one cares about the brand. And we were a little bit like, well, actually, we're going to push back a little bit on that advice, and we're going to insert just enough about our brand values, our brand aesthetic, brand guidelines, and this brand story into this landing page and into the product story. And it's really worked for us. We've had a lot of people comment on the fact that they felt, like Anish said earlier, that aesthetically it stood out, but also the brand story is just really interesting. It's got a great hook. It's really authentic. And so I think, we really love that it's important. We think it's important to couch the product in a broader story. I was talking to another creator who's on Launchboom recently, because we have quite a few people who have been asking us for some of our advice. And the first thing I said to him, I looked at his page, I was like, you're not on the page. Why are you not on the page? We need to know more about you, your story, and why your team are making this product.
Yeah, totally. The other thing I was going to say in terms of learnings was, it's a bit of a cliche, right? But the value of building that community of early adopters and people who really, really back your vision and product in the same way that you do, it's so, so important. It's so, so important. It's one of those learnings that, in the pre-phase, we were sort of, you're building those $1 deposits when we launched, and sort of we were trying to convert more people to our sort of early adopters group as we were kind of growing and kind of continuing and sort of continuing to move towards launch. Those sort of evangelists of your product are so, so important. So now that we've launched and continuing to kind of grow, there's so much more activity of these people who are with us from the part of the journey at the beginning all the way through to launch and continuing. So much great feedback, so many great ideas. That is one key thing that we can see the value if we continue to grow, develop, and scale. Like it's so, so important.
Yeah, I also want to add to that then, because you're talking about community, and there's this kind of famous Brian Chesky from Airbnb mantra about do things that don't scale. And I think it was Paul Graham from YC who also said that a lot of entrepreneurs at the start, they make the mistake of delegating too many things too early. And so the thing that you don't want to delegate is talking to customers. And so we honestly, in the last 4 months, have responded to thousands of emails and DMs and comments on our social media posts, because some of our social media stuff went mega viral. We've had like 7 million views on one reel, 1.5 million on another, 500,000 on another. So we had a lot of comments to respond to, a lot of DMs, but we did all of them ourselves, right? Me and Anish did probably 80%, and we had this amazing social media woman that's been helping us as well. She did a few of them as well. And it's, but we learned so much by just being there, responding directly to everyone. We learned about what people care about. We learned about what their needs are. So we know what our next product is going to be, probably the Loka XL. And so, yeah, it's just great to be in that direct conversation. The other thing to add to that, though, is we made a real conscious effort to try and delight people with our customer service. So just like really human responses, have a bit of a laugh with people, but just kind of like over communicate. We put a lot of effort into like actually just sharing the story, giving people detailed responses, bringing them into the journey. And I think it really helps. It really helps us convert people.
Yeah, there's that classic phrase that we're dropping in all the founder comments, aren't we? That Jeff Bezos shareholder letter from like I don't remember, it was 2017 or 18, where he was like, customers are always amazingly and beautifully dissatisfied or underwhelmed, I think is what the comment was. And I think the reality is it's so true. Like there's so many people out there who want you to be supporters of your product, but the experience they get is so bad. And we really took that to heart in everything we did. And it's exactly why what Nikhil said, right? That we responded personally to all of those ourselves. We tried to bring humor, a bit of our own personalities to it, really connect with people. And I think the results really show that.
Now let's talk about stuff that didn't work.
I would say the first thing is that we approached this campaign naturally skeptical of everything. I was like really skeptical that there's all these like hawk companies like flying around the crowdfunding space trying to get money out of you, trying to rip you off. And I just basically took everything as like a rip off. I didn't really pay attention to the fact that any of these companies are actually offering you a valuable service. And so it took us a little bit too long to switch on some of the channels. It was only until we spoke to a few other creators, maybe 2 weeks into the campaign, that we realized, oh, actually, newsletters can work. Things like Kickbooster for affiliates can work. And so if we did some of that learning and some of those conversations 3-4 weeks earlier, and we switched it on from day 1 instead of day 15, we could have been a little bit more successful and just not lost some of that time. So whilst I think it's really important to be skeptical and to question things, actually, some of that was unfounded skepticism. So I hadn't done the homework.
Yeah, and then building on, this is the point that I thought was going to nicely segue from Nicholas, actually. So I thought this was going to happen. It's almost as if we're glad that is actually the time element, right? I think, we touch on this a lot, but we did give ourselves a lot of time, but I think, as with all things, right, if you give yourself enough time to sort of try and buffer in and try and test all the avenues that you want, instead of being not reactive, but more time is always better than less, right? That's the general principle. So however long you think you're going to need, add another month just so you can test these things and try these things like Nikhil mentioned, newsletters, whatever else there is, etc. Those things earlier to then get the results and then get the benefit of them. Because with crowdfunding, more time is always better than less.
That's good. Anything else? I mean, you mentioned Nikhil, Kickbooster, that works, right? What else worked for you guys? Because, I mean, the moment you launch, literally 30 to 50 different people will reach out, especially if you have that launch boom effect, right? Where you have all your VIPs and people on your email list converting in the first 24, 36 hours. You're going to rank fairly high. I think you guys were on the first page of Kickstarter for a little bit. And you're going to get a ton of people reaching out, offering you services, newsletter placements, etc. It sounded like you just ignored all of them in the first 2 weeks, which is reasonable. Honestly, it's kind of overwhelming. But after you did your diligence and dug through it and talked to other creators, what were the ones that you found that worked well and what didn't work well?
Well, I mean, specific newsletters we can go to in a second, but your question, what worked well, I think let's take it sequentially, right? If we take it logically, what worked well, firstly, like we talked about earlier, was doing the pre-launch really diligently, really well. We spent a decent amount of money on paid media. And it's funny because it feels like a massive risk as an entrepreneur. We by the end of the campaign, we were on Amexes and credit cards and whatever. But by that point, we knew that there was a really strong ROAS. So it's not actually a risk, right? Like when we went live with our pre-launch ads, we started getting we were getting $10, $11 CPAs for a reservation. And we knew that at that point, if you kind of like multiply it up, $10 CPA for one reservation, 1 in 3 convert, that's a $30 CPA for a circa $100 to $105 basket. That's a 3x ROAS already, just on the pre-launch, right? We were like, okay, this is working. So we were very confident in doubling down on ad spend. And it's so funny, again, I look back, you could see how hesitant we were at the start in the pre-launch. Like Hera's advice, I think the advice was like start your campaigns on like whatever $20 per creative per ad set, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll start on 15 because it feels like a lot of money, right? And so our daily ad spend of like $75 at the start, where I was like quite nervous. By the end of it, we're spending like $900 a day. We are just absolutely fine with it, right? Like, no, not sweating at all. It's so funny, right? How things change. So we did the pre-launch, really well because we have confidence. We ended with about 22,000 emails, 4,000 VIPs. We knew that would convert to like whatever, 150K-ish in backing. But then we had to figure out how to build momentum off the back of that. The next thing that I think was really, it worked, but was also a lot of luck, was that we unlocked influencers and we unlocked social media in a way that like we could never have predicted. Anish, I think you should talk about this one.
We had a short list, I think, of influencers that we kind of originally started just putting together. But to be honest with you, because we only had one prototype, which was the one that I had at my house, we just thought there isn't really any way we're going to be able to pull on this lever, because how do you then just get one prototype out to all these influencers? And then, we did mull on this a little bit. Beginning, we're like, oh, do we send it to them and then ask them to send it back? And then, then we thought, oh, well, that won't work, because what happens if one person does it? It's going to completely ruin everything, and that's our baby gone. And don't forget, this prototype cost, almost close to $1,000 to make. Like, oh God, how are we going to manage that? But what happened is the stars aligned, because we reached out to one influencer who was in the UK, and London Kilali. She was, big shout out to London Kilali. She has been incredible throughout. So much support for us. And she really, really loved the product. She said to us throughout the whole campaign, like, the reason why I'm so into this, guys, is because I really believe this personally myself. And when we unlocked an influencer like that who believed in our product and had the same vision as us, it just really step changed everything. We created content and reels with her. One of them on TikTok hit 1 million. The one that we've currently got with her, that we sort of went live, we did 2 reels with her. One has hit close to 1.2 million. The second one we've created, which was this, if you haven't seen it, please check out our Instagram. I'm sure it will give you a couple of laughs. But it's this sort of funny sort of ad around the Loka Chai maker. That is currently on close to 6.8 million views. And the level of engagement that we got on questions and inbound questions we got asking, how do I order this? Where do I get this? The level of discussion it generated was amazing, was incredible. And that just really step changed so much for us. Was there anything you want to add, Nick, to that?
Oh, no, to shout out to her. Yeah. And then I guess off the back of that, we were able to then have a bit more confidence that influencers as a channel can work. So we then went out and just kind of proactively got, 2 or 3 more high profile videos lined up for over the course of the campaign. So if you look at our channel now, it's an Instagram account that was like opened a few months before we launched our Kickstarter. We've got now, 11,000 followers, and every single reel of ours is on like either, 5, 6 or 7 figures in views. And it's kind of mad, right? Like that it's taken off so much. But I think we also then, we realized that this can work if you do collaboration content with the right people, but also crucially, and I've been talking to quite a few other founders about this recently, in how to work with influencers, is it's not about you and your story and how you want to present your product. Let them be the creative, right? It's their idea. Just let them run with it and just support them. Give them the product and let them do what they want to do. Because they've got the audience, and that's going to resonate a lot better. And I think a lot of instinct initially for brands is to try and control the narrative a bit too much.
Yeah, that's so good, guys. And I wanted to also just come back to highlight, the risk of ad spend that you were talking about, Nikhil, in the very beginning. Like, I would encourage everyone to be very careful with every dollar that they spend, right? You should think that way. And, people, and I'm going to ask you how much you spent on advertising shortly, but people look at those numbers on the case studies that we publish on our blog and stuff and go, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I would not do that. I would not spend $10,000, $900 a day. That's crazy, right? But what they don't understand is everyone starts out with the same mentality that you had, Nikhil and Anish, and what I had when I was the product creator as well, right? We would start out, oh my gosh, that's like another $100 I spent today on advertising that may or may not work. But what you have to understand and what you have to see as a product creator is you're learning what are the things that resonate. And once you find those things that resonate and you get statistically significant data telling us every dollar we're spending, we're getting multiple dollars back in profitable revenue, like the math that you were doing, Nikhil. And, you were saying we're getting a, 3x ROAS, return on advertising spend, but you are only counting the dollar deposits, right? There's also the email that people sign up that are also going to buy. And then the people that don't sign up, you retarget them as well, right? And you gather that data, they're following you, and maybe they're not buying from the Kickstarter campaign, but they're just waiting for the product to be listed on Amazon. And so you're going to get your ROAS, total ROAS is going to be significantly higher if you just did an overlap of the advertising audiences that you built with sales in the first 6 months, not just the crowdfunding campaign, right? And really 6 months is at the minimum that you should be looking at anyway with a physical product. People typically don't see it for the first time and buy it right away anyway, right? Think about our own purchase behaviors. How often do we see a product on social media and buy it immediately? There are certainly people that do that, but a lot of people don't. So I just wanted to highlight that for listeners and product creators. You should be skeptical and very careful in the beginning, but just know that you're doing it for a very specific reason to reach that point of, that mathematical equation of I spend this, I get that, I have a sales and distribution channel. Great, right? Now you have a real business. So that's the point that we're trying to reach. So maybe, Nikhil, you want to elaborate on that, or Anish, you guys want to elaborate on that? And then I'd love to hear about how much you guys spent in total for advertising as well.
Yeah, well, we can just go into that. If we look at everything across paid social, paid search, newsletters, newsletter commission, Kick Booster commission, some of the social media content we paid for, I would say it probably totals up at just under $75,000 US. That grossed us revenue of 600, right? And so we're talking about a ROAS there of 8, which is just bonkers, right? When I talk to any other D2C company I know. So yeah, obviously we are very, very happy with that.
What about so $75,000 included commissions and, content and all of that, which is important. What about just advertising spend? What was that breakdown?
Just paid media would be about 60,000.
Okay. Gotcha. That's awesome. Appreciate you sharing that.
But actually, sorry, just one more thing to touch on here is that we also unlocked Google too late. And it's interesting because Google is not really something that is part of the launch stream playbook. And I can see why, because at the start, really you're looking at demand generation and you're looking at trying to educate people visually with a product that doesn't exist yet. But I do think personally, if we did it again, we would open up Google as a channel earlier. We only basically started running for the last 10 days of the campaign. And then I very, very quickly hustled up a mate of mine who's a ninja at Google Ads. And he did a bit of work to rebuild our Google stack. And it was working, we were getting not quite as good ROAS as Facebook, but only because we didn't have the time to optimize it. But when you think about all of those ad channels combined and you think about blended ROAS, Google's an important part of the marketing mix. Because you do have people searching. Once they know about your product, you do have people searching, and you want to capture that demand.
Yeah, I would say though, your product is a bit of an exception where people are actually searching for, Loka Chai and the demand that you guys had generated from the Facebook, and also the influencers probably led to more searches and higher intent searches, etc. We do Google advertising consulting with some of our clients that choose to expand to that as well. And very rarely do we see positive returns, actually. So that's good for you guys. Yeah. Okay. So we talked a lot about, actually, I wanted to come back to, you said we had Amexes and all of that, right? And so you put the ad spend on credit. And again, for people listening, it sounds very risky, actually, but you didn't do that in the beginning, right? You had a few $1,000s of your own risk, quote unquote, risk capital that you put up front to do the learnings, get to the essential messaging that would get you the, returns. And then once you did that, you're like, yeah, I could allocate cash to it if I wanted to, or I could even, borrow from friends and family if I wanted to, but there's, credit 0% interest-free credit cards right out there as well. Or I don't know if yours was actually interest-free. That's actually what I did when I launched my campaigns. And then you just pay that down at the end of a successful campaign, right? So can you elaborate on that and how you thought about that and when that tipping point was?
I was just going to say, just quickly, that's exactly what Nick was going to say. I think the reality is that it touches on the comment that Nick made previously, right? But the reality is you see the proof in the pudding when the reservations, when you go live and actually as part of the reservation process, you can see how people are converting, and roughly, you can do the maths around where the danger zone is based on your product pricing and actually how much you're spending. And then as soon as, for us, at least personally, when we were going through the campaign, it went live and we saw the conversion, that was really the point at which we went, okay, actually, we know the risk levels here that we're accepting as part of this because of the conversion rates and what we're doing. So it's a no-brainer to do the same that you did, right, Kevin, which is a 0% Amex, which we can use for our spend, which then gives us the return of X, which we're spending Y, and we know we're going to pay down at the end of the campaign. And so that then de-risks things a lot, right? But ultimately it boils down to that equation, really. And you'll know at that point particularly when you launch and go live, actually, this is our conversion rate. This is how it's working. This is the point of risk. And this is what we're accepting as part of that process. You do obviously have to keep track of your ad spend as part of that because you're testing, iterating. And, Nick was doing a great job, like iterating, changing, testing different audiences, so on and so forth. We're watching that sort of the cost per reservation sort of each time very, very carefully, right, as part of that. But we knew as part of that process, this is the point at which it makes sense to do that.
Wonderful. What advice would you give to yourselves or people thinking about launching their own products?
I mean, one thing we haven't got into, so I've got a very tactical one, and Anish, then you can go, but just because we're building on this ad stuff, right, just to finish off this ad conversation, I really, really strongly, maybe it's easier said than done, but I really strongly recommend people run their own ad account and don't outsource it to a company like Jellup. Because firstly, you're probably doing that already in the pre-campaign, so you kind of know what you're doing. And it's like really fundamental skills that you need to be able to understand and know so you can really build this company for the long term. But also on a simple, very fundamental economic level, it just doesn't make sense to give out 20% commission on every sale that is generated by someone else who's running your ads for you. When you do the maths on that, but we looked at a few other people's dashboards with Jellup, you essentially end up paying for every dollar you spend on Meta, you pretty much give $1 to Jellup. I don't know any media agency in the world that charges you 100% commission on the spend you make. So the simple maths that you've got to think about is, if you're paying them $1 for every dollar you spend to Meta, are they going to be twice as effective as you are going to be with your ads? And I can tell you for a fact the answer is no. They might be 30% more effective. They might be 35% more effective. They're not going to be 100% more effective. I can tell you again that every single Kickstarter creator I spoke to in the last month said, I started with Jellup and I switched them off after 4 days. I didn't speak to a single person who said, I was happy with them, they did a good job, and I'm happy to pay them. So it's just like, just do those numbers, right? You've got to think about the commissions they're giving away. The flip side of that is that, and this is why I was so hesitant with newsletters, because they were like, oh, we're going to take 15%, 20%. I was like, that's so much money. I fundamentally don't believe that a marketing company deserves that margin of your product. Think about how much hard work it takes you to invent and develop that product. And most creators are going to take maybe 30, 40% margin to themselves. So to give 20% to someone who's just running an ad for you, it just feels like daylight robbery. But the reason I was able to get comfortable with newsletters is that it's a one and done, where you're giving them that 20% commission, 15%, whatever it is. They're doing a single shot. It's an audience that you're not really going to get otherwise. Gives you a massive bump for that day, and that day leads to additional organic revenue. And it actually is worth it for that. But for a partner that's going to be running your ad account for the whole 30 days, it's not worth it for that.
Well, the only thing I was going to say was, as well as part of that is, there was a load that, we're talking about the sort of, for newsletters and partners, etc. I would say Nick also did a great job in doing the due diligence as part of that as well. Like, there was a huge spreadsheet that he was keeping in terms of collecting all the data around insights from who's charging what and how do we do it, and actually how much the commission is, and also then negotiating with those guys as well. Like, actually there's a lot of, sometimes, I think people just hear a service or a service level and they go, oh, okay, well, that's the rate. It's like, no, this is a commercial discussion. You can have that conversation. That's okay. And I think sometimes creators are so focused on the product that you lose sight of actually it's a commercial relationship and negotiation too. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely one thing to bear in mind, I would say, going ahead, is that be tenacious, negotiate, do your due diligence, and actually don't be afraid to put yourself out there and try and do what works well for you and your vision as well.
I would say also some people would come back and say, well, like, don't you want to pay a commission? Then your incentives are more aligned, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on how you approach the commission. I agree with you, right? But there's a threshold at which you're like, okay, this is a bit too much. If someone's charging me 100%, this is pointless, right? So that balance in terms of commission, yeah, I agree. There is probably a point on that, right? And you need to strike the right balance as to what you think is the right amount. But at the same time, some of these also then had flat fees at the beginning in terms of X, Y, Z that they would charge you before that commission rate even kicked in. That's still a negotiation, right? But as with all these things. The other part is that on those commission rates, you say that, right? You want to incentivize the right amount as to what their behavior is. Very, very true. But are they going to really, really change the behavior if there's a 5% difference between, let's say 45 or 50, let's say, for example? Reality is they're still incentivized to do the same work that they've got. It's still a great rate you're giving them. You're going to know when you've pushed too hard and it's unacceptable. So my motto is always just try and actually have the conversation. Your commercial partner will let you know if you're taking the mick. They want the business, so let them make that point.
And I mean, just to clarify for listeners, Jellup charges a 15% of pledges attributable to their efforts, right? At least that's, coming from the site.
It's 15 or 22.5, depending on the number they're looking at. So it's either 15% of their numbers or 22%, 22.5 of the Kickstarter numbers. So in my head, I just look at it as a blended 20.
Right. And I believe it's whichever is lower. Is that right? Correct?
Whichever is lower, yeah.
Yeah.
But the analysis I did of every dollar you spend $1 with them, that was based on looking at the dashboard of a real Jellup case study.
We're at almost an hour now, which is kind of wild. That really, really flew by. So let's wrap up here. But before we wrap up, just a couple last questions. Like, what is the vision now for Loka? And you now have a successful crowdfunding campaign. You guys already have tooling done. You guys are going into manufacturing. You guys are going to deliver the units. Obviously, you're looking to sell more. You talked about Loka XL. What else? What is your, 2-year, 3-year vision for the business?
Well, great question. We've thought about this a lot, I think, we thought about this even before we went live with Kickstarter, right? Like, Nick and I were having in-depth discussions around what are we building, how is it going to be, what do we want it to look like, feel like, brand, etc. That influenced everything that we did actually throughout the campaign. So that's an important thing. Is actually, I would say that to people listening, make sure you have that conversation. But for us personally, we really feel like there's a moment in time right now with South Asian culture and South Asian heritage, and for us, Loka is a South Asian, well, it's rooted in this vision of a South Asian design store that, as Nick says, is rooted in sort of tradition, but reimagined for today. And it brings this idea of the sort of, I guess the way you would call it is the cultural heritage of South Asia, but brings it into the contemporary space and with modern design in a way that really speaks to consumers today as well. So there's all sorts of really amazing products that we're already talking about between Nick and myself, in terms of what could this turn into, what could this be, and what could we do? But I think fundamentally as well, the thing that's really captured a lot of people's attention today with the Chai Maker is the fact that it solves this problem. We've really come back to that sort of grounding around the product. And I think things that we're thinking about going ahead, we would love them to speak to this contemporary and design, but we really also want them to continue to solve those problems. Because that, we think, is really where a lot of the sweet spot can be as well in terms of value that we're adding to consumers' lives too. Nick, was there anything else you wanted to add on that?
I really enjoyed your interview, your conversation with him. I took a lot of inspiration from that, and I think he's a really cool guy. And it's a similar thing, right? Like, he's built this incredible multi-product brand with a couple of like, standout successful products, but ultimately like everything he's doing is just, he wants to solve problems in the kitchen, and he wants to, and he's not afraid to make premium products that cost a little bit more compared to what people are used to paying for things, because he's doing them well, he's doing them with integrity, he's doing them at a really high quality. And so, yeah, I think, there's a lot of things that we can continue to make and a lot of problems we can continue to solve. And I think there's a really exciting future for Loka.
That's wonderful. So you guys are both like very high performing professionals, right? I mean, Anish, you're the head of legal for GiftGaff, and then you're currently the general counsel. Nikhil, you started businesses, you're an advisor for businesses, you're a board member, you've been a CEO as well. And then on top of that, you guys are starting a whole nother business with Loka, right? It's gotta not be easy. What do you guys do on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Like, what is your advice to all the other founders out there that are, on the verge of killing themselves, working their butts off, right? Like, how do you keep up that momentum and that pace? Because ultimately starting a business is a marathon and not a sprint.
You have to have that conviction, like you said. I won't touch on the practical things. I'll probably come a little bit later. But I think, like you said, you have to bear in mind that it is just that one foot in front of the other. And there's no point trying to make it that every day you're running, 50 miles, where actually, like you said, it is just keep going, pace yourself, and don't do it to the point that you either kill yourself or kill the business, right? Because if you don't take care of yourself and actually what you're trying to achieve and your health, the reality is you're not going to be able to achieve what you want for your business as well. So you're doing things like actually taking the time to shut your laptop and actually maybe even just go for a walk. Doing things like, those things that really ground you as an individual, that you get more time to energize from, is super important for making, just me personally, making time for that is along the way, be that with family or friends or going to the gym or whatever it is super, super, super important.
And that walk between you two, right? That's how Loka was born. So yeah, definitely don't want to stop that.
Keep walking, everyone.
Yeah, I think from my side, one of the things that I've started to kind of cultivate a little bit more for me is, after stepping back from my previous company, Mixcloud, I wanted to like kind of re-engage with my creativity and also like physical practices, doing a lot of yoga, but also learning to play the piano again, and doing this thing called the Artist Way. And I feel like with Loka, what I've tried to do is cultivate this idea of being a creative entrepreneur more than just an entrepreneur, and bringing a little bit of the spirit of an artist and a creative to this project, which is a very different mindset, right? If you come at everything just as an entrepreneur, everything's about goals, objectives, KPIs. But how do artists think? Artists operate in a very different way. They want to create beautiful things and bring beautiful things into the world. And a lot of our objective at the start, I mean, Anish, honestly, when we were talking about this in the early days, we said we'd be really happy with this if we just create a beautiful product and it's used by a few thousand people. We can change the way a few thousand people have a relationship with chai. It'll be a cool thing to do. And that's kind of how we thought about it at the start. Obviously, our expectations are slightly shifting now, but I want to continue for us as partners, and also for the values of the business, to still operate with that little bit of that lens of like, we're artists and entrepreneurs.
Well, I think that's a really good place to wrap up. Are there any final asks that you have of the listeners before we close out here?
One thing I would want to say to anyone who's listening, because I think, I listened to the podcast as well before I listened to other podcasts like this, is it's a bit of a cliche, but if you have an idea, if you have a vision or something that you think could work, please, please, please don't be afraid to just try. The first step is always the hardest, right? The idea, putting it down on paper or speaking to someone or doing whatever it is you want to do, just give it a go. Because I think if we didn't have that mindset around this, we wouldn't be here today. So that would be the one piece of advice I would say to anyone listening.
I think your question was, what is an ask? I mean, not much I can really say apart from check out the campaign if you haven't already. Follow us on Instagram. Connect with us. Feel free to drop us a note, drop us a DM. We always love to hear from people.
Wonderful. And we didn't get to talking about the story of the product today, but for everyone listening, Anish mentioned London Kilali, and a great YouTube channel. Definitely check it out and subscribe. I'll link to that video that, shows your product, talks about your story, in the podcast notes as well. It's a wonderful video. It's only about 11 minutes and covers a lot of ground. So really appreciate you guys making the time to share your learnings and mistakes and what worked for you guys. And really appreciate you guys being on. Thank you so much.